Welcome to our weekly roundup of key business developments in Sri Lanka. I'm Nishani Figuera. Let's first take a look at the top stories for this week. IMF expresses support for Sri Lanka's debt restructuring negotiations. Divestiture of Sri Lankan Airlines gathers pace. And Sri Lanka expects over $4 billion in FDIs this year. In our main story this week, the IMF expressed its support for Sri Lanka's debt discussions with its private creditors and to provide a formal assessment on reaching a tentative agreement in principle. This follows last week's discussions where the bondholder group rejected two government proposals despite it being compliant with the IMF's parameters. However, according to Dr. Indrajit Kumaraswamy, former central bank governor, possible delays in reaching such an agreement is unlikely to impact the disbursement of the IMF third tranche, given that negotiations are moving ahead in good faith. Meanwhile, Sri Lanka also needs to enact the proposed Public Financial Management Act ahead of the Executive Board approval for the third tranche. The bill focuses on fiscal rules aimed at increasing financial discipline in budget formulation and execution. According to Standard Chartered analysts, Sri Lanka should be able to finalize a debt restructuring deal by mid-May. On Wednesday, the oil share price index at the Colombo Stock Exchange rebounded, recouping some losses from the past week, crossing the 11,900 index mark. Investor interest was witnessed in conglomerates, construction, and hotel sector stocks. The index is now up a significant 12% from the start of the year. Increasing retail and institutional investor participation in the pause over the past 2 weeks is driving daily turnover in April to average 2.8 billion rupees, much higher than the first 2 months of the year. Sri Lankan Airlines received bids from 6 parties for the acquisition of shares in the state-run carrier. Among the bidders were AirAsia and FitzAir, a privately owned Sri Lankan airline. Earlier this year, the government absorbed Sri Lankan Airlines' outstanding debt of around $510 million, including a $175 million bond owed to various banks, and gave it 6 months' time to show operational performance before the divestiture. The airline currently operates 16 aircraft and employs around 6,000 staff. According to M.M. Naimuddin, Secretary at the Ministry of Investment Promotion, Sri Lanka is expected to attract around $4 to $4.5 billion in foreign investments, with a specific focus on renewable energy and minerals. According to him, there will be an increased focus on attracting investments in solar, wind, and ammonia-related energy projects. Just this week, Iranian President Ibrahim Raisi inaugurated the $529 million 120-megawatt Uma oil hydropower project. This development helps Sri Lanka expedite its aims to generate 70% of its energy needs through renewable energy sources by 2030. Sri Lanka's key island-wide inflation fell to 2.5% year-on-year in March from 5.1% in February. The inflation decrease was largely driven by reductions in non-food group items such as housing, water, and electricity. Inflation is expected to rise from April as a favorable base effect is no longer applicable. According to Verite Research, Sri Lanka will miss its budgeted revenue targets for the 33rd consecutive year. This development comes as Sri Lanka conversely exceeded its tax revenue target by as much as 6% in the first quarter of 2024. This year, the government is targeting to collect a revenue of around 4 trillion rupees. In our weekly tourism update, during the first 21 days of April, over 107,000 tourists arrived in the country. In the year, just over 742,000 have arrived. Daily arrivals were 5,101 during the month, down from the 6,748 recorded in March. India was the primary source market, followed by Russia and the United Kingdom. At the Treasury bill auction held on Wednesday, yields on all maturities decreased for the third consecutive week. Bids amounting to 214 billion rupees were received, of which 92 billion were accepted. The Sri Lankan rupee fluctuated against the dollar this week, with the central bank's indicative mid-spot rate ranging around 298 to 301 rupees. And with that, we wind up for this week. Do subscribe to our YouTube channel at the link below for regular updates on economic and business developments in Sri Lanka. Until we see you again next week, thank you for watching. Stay safe.